Hey guys, my name is Taylor and welcome back to Taylor on TV. So in this video, we're going to be revisiting the Twilight Zone. In the last video, we discussed the original series created by Rod Serling. For whatever reason, I called that man Ron Serling throughout the whole first video. I am fully aware that his name is Rod Serling. So in the last video, we discussed the original Twilight Zone series created by Rod Serling, which aired from 1959 till 1964. In this video, we're going to be focusing on the 1985 revival of the Twilight Zone. So this 1985 version is actually the first of 3 revivals, and like the original version, this series features characters from seemingly ordinary worlds who find themselves in bizarre or paranormal situations. So in this revival, the voiceover narration is still present, but it's not as consistent as it was in the original version of The Twilight Zone. Rod Serling actually ended up passing away in 1975, so unfortunately he was unable to narrate for this series. Instead, the role was taken by Charles Aidman, who had previously starred in 2 classic episodes of The Twilight Zone. Charles Aidman was the narrator for the first 2 seasons, but for the 3rd season he was replaced by a Canadian actor named Robin Ward. Unlike Serling, neither one of these men actually appeared on screen, so we only have voiceover narration instead of a visual narrator. So after the original Twilight Zone ended in 1964, Rod Serling sold the rights to the show to CBS. This allowed the network to revive the series as an in-house production, which was better for them financially instead of purchasing a brand new show from an external production company. Despite the bad reviews of the Twilight Zone movie that came out in 1983, CBS decided to move forward with this new series. Now, speaking of the Twilight Zone movie, before we move on, I want to make note that I am not going to be talking about that movie while talking about the Twilight Zone. I've attempted to watch that movie several times. I can't even tell you how many times I tried to watch that movie, but for whatever reason, every time I put it on, I either fall asleep or end up scrolling on my phone. It is so boring to be associated with a show as good as the Twilight Zone. It just doesn't connect for me. It doesn't feel like the Twilight Zone. So I personally found the movie to be very unwatchable. And then you also have the accident that happened while filming that movie. I believe it was a helicopter crash, and I think they said it's one of the worst on-set accidents to ever happen in a movie. And I think 2 children passed away as a result of it. I think maybe 3 people. Don't quote me, but there's just a very big tragedy that happened on set of that movie, and I don't know, something about it, I just can't watch it. So I won't be discussing it while talking about all the different eras of the Twilight Zone. Let me know, though, in the comments if you like the movie and if I should give it another chance. If you guys say it's good, then I'll check it out. So now that we've talked about the origins of the 1985 Twilight Zone revival, and we talked a little bit about the Twilight Zone movie, let's talk about 3 of my favorite episodes from the 1985 reboot of the Twilight Zone. Hey guys, it's Taylor from the future. After telling the first story that I wanted to talk about, I realized that could probably use a trigger warning, so trigger warning for this subject matter. If this is something that you don't want to talk about or listen to a story about, I highly suggest you skip to this timestamp right here and we can pick up on story number 2. This subject matter, it's not graphic. I don't go into detail at all, but if it's something that you don't want to talk about or don't want to hear about, I completely understand that. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of a warning, and you can skip to story number 2. Okay, so the first episode I want to talk about is called The Call. So we are introduced to our very lonely main character. His name is Norman Blaine. Norman is in his apartment watching TV when he falls asleep on his couch. He wakes up at midnight to a classical hits infomercial. You guys remember those infomercials? I think my favorite one is like a Celine Dion or tell me how am I supposed to live without you? Tell me how am I supposed to live without you?
In a once-in-a-lifetime collection.
That's my favorite infomercial. Anyways, he's awakened to a classical music infomercial, and I'm guessing he wants a classic music CD. So he picks up the phone and he dials the number on the infomercial. However, I think he gets the number wrong because he's connected with a woman who informs him that he has dialed the wrong number. But instead of hanging up, the woman ends up wanting to talk to Norman. And since Norman is lonely, they talk for hours. So the woman's name is Mary Ann, and they end up talking for a very long time and enjoying each other's company. So much so that Norman actually goes to work the next day and tells his coworkers about it. Like, you're that lonely, you tell somebody about a phone call, I guess. Norman says the conversation is unusual for him because it felt so comfortable, almost like he has known her for a long time. His coworker actually gives him the advice to ask Mary Ann out on a date should he talk to her again. And that's what Norman does. So the next night, Mary Ann and Norman actually end up talking on the phone for like 3 hours. And the conversation is going so well that Norman actually takes his coworker's advice and asks Mary Ann out on a date. Or he asks her if she would like to meet him out somewhere, and she actually refuses. So Norman pretends to be okay with this, even though it's literally breaking his heart. He would like to meet her. So the next day he goes back to his coworker and he tells the coworker what happened. And the coworker gives him some of the creepiest advice. He says that Norman should call the operator and ask to get her address, or ask the operator if he could like tell him what street this number was on. Remember, this was back in the 80s, and I think that the telephone operators had that capability, and it wasn't so weird to do something like this back then. Now it seems very creepy to do that, but the plan is to get her address and to kind of just walk up and down the street or walk in that general area until he runs into her and then goes, "Oh, hey, I was just in the area by coincidence. You want to hang out now?" Bad advice, but that's what Norman sets out to do. So the address leads Norman to a civic art gallery. Now, at the civic art gallery, Norman asks the receptionist if he could speak to Mary Ann, and the receptionist at the front desk has no idea who he's talking about. Norman decides to walk around the art gallery, and he finds a phone in the gallery and decides to dial Mary Ann's phone number from that telephone. So after he picks up the phone and dials her number, he hears a phone ringing nearby. He goes to that phone and answers it. I don't know why he would answer it, but there's nobody on the other line. After he hangs with the phone, he sees a sculpture of a girl on the bench. Now, another person in the museum tells him about this sculpture. And it's the last works from an artist who actually ended up taking her own life, and the artist's name was Mary Ann. Later that night, Norman calls Mary Ann on the phone, and Mary Ann actually confronts him and says that she saw him today, and she saw him talking to another woman. So Norman is obviously freaked out and says that's impossible because he's putting two and two together that Mary Ann is the statue that he saw at the gallery that day. Now he hangs up in her face and she calls back, or he calls back, I don't remember. And Mary Ann actually apologizes to Norman and she says that she should have never answered the phone the night that he called. She was just really lonely and she felt like she just wanted somebody to talk to. And I guess Norman can relate to that since he is very lonely as well. Now, I'm doing a very poor job of explaining the character of Norman, but we can see that he's really, really lonely. And, you know, just the concept of him talking on the phone to somebody for like more than 30 minutes is getting him very happy, very excited. So he knows where she's coming from as far as being lonely. So he goes back to the gallery that night and he decides to actually sit there and talk to the bronze statue that is Mary Ann. And he can hear her speaking to him. Mary Ann says that she wants to be with him and he wants to be with her. And they actually end up deciding to spend forever together. He leans in to hug her. And right as he's leaning in, we can see that there is a security guard walking up to the art exhibit, and the security guard shines a flashlight on the art exhibit, and instead of Mary Ann being on the bench alone, Norman is sitting right across from her, getting ready to hug her. So they're both frozen in this almost embrace. And I don't know, this episode is actually sad now that I'm saying it. So Mary Ann was an artist who took her own life, and that was her last piece of art before she took her own life, this sculpture of herself lonely on a bench. And then we have Norman, who was also very lonely, And in the end, he ends up as a statue beside her. And if her statue was a reflection of what she did to herself or a precursor to what she did to herself, I'm wondering, did Norman also do that to himself? Anyways, I thought it was a bizarre episode and it was one of the first episodes from this reboot that I had ever seen. So I wanted to talk about it. But now that I'm talking about it, I'm realizing how sad it actually could be if you really sit there and think about it long enough. Moving on to the next episode, we're going to be talking about the trunk. Now, in the first video where I talked about the original series of the Twilight Zone, I told you guys that I really, really like a be careful what you wish for style story. And this is what that is. Another correction that I want to make, I said that I like a be careful what you wish for style story. And I gave The Monkey's Paw as an example. And I said that The Monkey's Paw was a story by Edgar Allan Poe. No, The Monkey's Paw is actually a story by W.W. Jacobs. So I want to make that correction. So let's get into the trunk. We meet our main character, and his name is Willie Gardner, and he is the manager of a rundown hotel. When he is at the front desk that morning, he is actually bullied by three guys. I think it's three guys and a girl. They're actually making fun of him. It's one of those like, I want to take you on a date pranks. The girl's actually talking to him as if she's interested, and when he finally folds and believes her, the rest of the guys laugh and basically say, you know, as if. Kind of mean, and I really feel bad for him. From the opening scene of this episode, I felt so sad. He looks so sweet and so lonely, and you know, he's one of those characters. First of all, I want to let you guys know I'm a very empathetic person. I think they call that an empath. I will cry at the drop of a dime. A lot of things make me cry, and I was this close. That's how sad he looked to me. So basically, this scene shows Willie and how he is treated by others. He is very sad, and people tend to pick on him a lot. Now, while cleaning the hotel, Willie stumbles into an empty room that has seemingly been abandoned by a tenant. And inside of this room, there is a large trunk. So Willie opens the trunk, and it is empty. And obviously frustrated that this was left behind by a tenant, Willie says something like, "If I had a nickel for every time somebody left behind an old piece of junk, I would be rich." Now, Willie tries to move the trunk after saying this, and it will not budge. He had just looked inside of the trunk, and he knows it's empty, so why is it so heavy? Well, he opens the trunk again, and it is filled with nickels. Now, remember, he just said, if I had a nickel for every time somebody left something behind, I would be rich. One issue I have, well, I guess it's not an issue. I'm just kind of slow. He put two and two together rather quickly. So he learns very fast that if he makes a wish in front of this trunk, his wish will come true. It probably would have taken me a while to figure out, like, what do I do? Do I just close it and wish, or I don't know. But in the next scene, we see Willie is having a party in this very nice area. I'm guessing he has his own room at the hotel. And I'm not even sure if this is a hotel or if it's an apartment complex. I wasn't paying attention. Anyways, Willie has stocked his space with some of the best items. He has like TVs and boom boxes and all kinds of things. And he is throwing a party for everyone to come attend. Now, Willie is feeling like he's on top of the world. He has friends, he has a party. And the girl from earlier in the episode, she is seemingly interested in him now. And it doesn't take him long to figure out that she's not actually interested in him. She's interested in what he has. So at this party, there are people having a great time. They're enjoying all of the free liquor that Willie can provide since he has the funds. And at one point, somebody just straight up asked him, "Can I have the TV off of your wall?" Or maybe he gets fed up with the idea that everybody is using him for his items, and he just tells somebody, "Just take the TV and leave." So somebody actually takes this man's TV and leaves the party. Now, another party goer sees this and he says, "Well, since he's taking the TV, can I have your radio?" And Willie's like, "Sure, take the radio." And so people just start picking up things and taking things out of his apartment, and they leave the party. Further solidifying the fact that people aren't there for Willie, they're there for his things. Now, remember the three bullies from the beginning of this episode. They see Willie as just passing out everything in his apartment. Matter of fact, they see Willie has a lot of new items in his room that he did not have before. They knew Willie did not have no money like that. And now he's passing out bottles of Cristal. Well, not Cristal. I'm joking. He's passing out bottles of liquor for free. He's giving out every electronic device that he has. It seems like Willie is balling and they want to know where Willie got this money. So they corner Willie and they tell him to give up all the money that he has, or they're basically going to beat him up. So Willie obviously can't give up any money because he doesn't have the money. He just has all these things that he wished for. Now, these three bullies don't believe him and they begin to chase him around the hotel. Now, in order to escape, Willie runs into the room where the trunk is, and he gets inside of the trunk. He effectively loses the bullies, but once the bullies leave the room and Willie tries to leave the trunk, he cannot escape. So he is trapped inside of this trunk and cannot get out, and that is a nightmare in itself, in my opinion. So in the next scene, we see that there is a woman in a nice apartment and she has the trunk. Now she's on the phone. I think she's on the phone with her mom and she has no idea where this trunk came from. And while she's on the phone, she's trying to open the trunk. She does not have the combination and it's just not opening up as easy as it did for Willie. So she has like something trying to pry it open. But while she's prying it open, she's talking to her mom about how she wishes she could just find a good man. And as soon as she says that, the trunk comes open and there's Willie, ready to be her brand new man, and she's willing to accept him. So I know in the beginning I said that I had a soft spot for Willie and how he seems so sweet and lovable, but there's something about the way he comes out of this trunk and the way his hair is styled. It's just giving serial killer. And immediately know, like the way she's just so ready to be in a relationship with him or happy to see him. I thought the show was going to end with her screaming like, what is this? Like it being like a horrifying moment for her. No, she's happy. She seems like this is the man of her dreams and she's okay with it. And I think it's been a minute since I watched it, but I think it also has like this romanticized soap opera feeling to the end. Like his hair might be blowing in the wind. I don't know. Don't quote me. I'm gonna have to go back and look at it. But it just seemed like it was supposed to just be so romantic and so beautiful, but really it's really creepy and immediately no. Okay, so moving on to the final episode I want to talk about, and it is called The After Hours. So if you watched my first Twilight Zone video, you'll remember that I talked about an episode called The After Hours, but there is a remake of that episode in the 1985 version of The Twilight Zone. So essentially it is the exact same plot as the original series, but this one ends a little bit creepier in my opinion. So the episode begins with our main character, Marcia, as she's frantically running up to a shopping mall. Now, in the original, the main character's name was also Marcia. Now, Marcia is entering the mall, and we see two men looking at her as she's entering, and their faces look oddly plastic. So as she's walking out, she's passing a security guard and he's warning her that they're getting ready to close. This mall is completely empty, but Marcia says, it's okay. I just need one thing. I'll be right in and right out. So Marcia goes up to the toy store and she is greeted by the sales associate who ultimately sells her a doll. Now, while she's waiting for the sales associate to get things wrapped up for her, Marcia is approached by a little boy in a tuxedo. And then his mother that is with him, she's in a sparkly gown. Now, this is weird for two people to be in a mall at closing time in a tuxedo and a gown. But what's even weirder is the little boy calls Marcia by name. Now, Marcia immediately notices this and wants to know how the little boy knows her name. The mother is like, I am so sorry for my son to be bothering you, but I'm sure he didn't call you Marcia. He called you ma'am. It's very obvious that the mother is covering for the little boy, but we just don't know why yet. So the sales associate comes back with the doll for Marcia, and I think Marcia explains that the doll is for her landlord's child because the landlord gave her an apartment even though she does not have money, a job, ID, none of that. So the sales associate begins to ask Marcia questions like, why don't you have a driver's license? Do you have a birth certificate? Do you know your parents' names? And these questions are so random and so weird. But even weirder, Marsha does not have the answer for these things. So as the sales associate keeps pressuring Marsha to answer these questions, Marsha decides to take the doll and run off. But as she's running off, those two men who look like plastic that were watching her when she came in the mall, yeah, they're still out there and they're after her now. So as she's running away from the two men, she gets into the elevator to escape, but the man ends up inside of the elevator with her. In this moment, we realize that this man does not have hands, but these little stuffed nubs. This man is a mannequin. He is not the hard, shiny plastic kind of mannequin. He's that like stuffed animal styled mannequin, or like the soft plushy style mannequin. And that's why his hands look like this. So Marsha begins to run out of the elevator and she is running around the department store trying to find the exit. When she finally finds it, it is locked and she is trapped inside. So at this moment, we get a remake of a scene that happened in the original After Hours episode. This is the scene where Marsha is in the department store and all the mannequins decide to start whispering her name. In this version, the mannequins are like shouting her name, or you know how you see a friend from a distance and you be like, hey girl, hey Marsha. That's kind of what it sounds like. So yeah, in this version, it's not so creepy. The way that they're saying her name, I think whispering her name was a lot more creepy. And then the department store in the original seemed a lot more secluded or a lot more creepy. Like I would be scared to be in the original department store. In this current version, the 80s version, the department store didn't seem scary. Maybe because it was newer, but it looked like I just wanted to explore. I would have been fine being locked in that department store. It wouldn't have been scary to me. So Marsha is still running around the department store trying to find an exit. So the department store woman and the two mannequin men basically run her down in the mall, and she's still trying to fight them off or like run away from them, but she's slowly turning into plastic the whole time. And as she's turning back into plastic, they're trying to convince her that she was a mannequin all along. Like, hey, don't you remember that you're a mannequin too? And you just had 30 days to live out in the real world and it's your turn to come back. And she's not remembering this. So she's literally panicking and turning into plastic while these people are telling her that she was a mannequin. And she never remembers or never goes, oh, I remember now. No, she's just panicking and turning into plastic. I don't think you guys realize how scary that is, but I think that is terrifying. So in the original, they tell Marsha, hey, you're a mannequin and we take turns going out into the real world for 30 days at a time. And it's just not your turn anymore. And in the original version, Marsha remembers that she's a mannequin and she comes to terms with this and she's like, oh, yeah, I remember. I am so sorry that I overstayed my turn. I am back at the store and it is somebody else's turn. Beautiful ending. And this ending, this Marsha never realizes the truth. That is a very terrifying way to go out and to not be able to come to terms with the fact that you're a mannequin before you are frozen in place for who knows how long. So I'm comparing it to almost being buried alive. Like she's stuck in this plastic until it's her turn again. You get what I'm saying? I don't know how to explain it, but that just seems so much worse than the original ending. Anyways, you guys, so that has been 3 of the episodes that I really enjoyed from this 80s revival of the Twilight Zone. Now, I'm not even going to lie to you guys. I am the least familiar with this rendition of the Twilight Zone. I think I didn't find out that it existed until like 8 years ago. And even after I figured out it existed, I did not watch a lot of the episodes. So I know nothing about this rendition, so I am very curious to know what your favorite episodes are from the 1985 version of The Twilight Zone. If you could, please put the best episodes down in the comments. I will be watching all of them. I actually kind of cherry pick my episodes and I read a brief description and then that's how I decide what to watch. But Yeah, I think collectively I've probably seen like 20 episodes or less. So put your favorite episode in the comments down below and I will be watching it. Okay, so that is the end of this video. Don't forget to like and comment your favorite episodes down below. In the next video, I'm going to be covering the 2002 version of the Twilight Zone, or as I like to call it, the Forest Whitaker version of the Twilight Zone. Yeah, we have a lot to talk about with the 2002 version. I'm so excited to make that video. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you guys next time.